Today, India is the fourth largest trading partner for Africa with a bilateral trade of about 84 billion US dollars and cumulative investments for more than 75 billion US dollars.
It's late evening in Ouagadougou. The capital of Burkina Faso is quiet, but inside the presidential palace, lights are still burning. At the center of the room sits a 36-year-old leader who has stunned the world with his speed, his defiance, and his ambition. Ibrahim leans forward, surrounded by maps, oil contracts, and mining reports. On one side of the table, his own ministers. On the other side, Indian envoys flown in for a confidential meeting. The deal on the table could change the future of West Africa. E's question is simple, but explosive. Why should Burkina Faso remain just another landlocked country, when it could be India's gateway to an entire continent? That single question is reshaping alliances, rewriting Africa's power map, and dragging India into a game usually dominated by China, France, and Russia. But how exactly does a young captain in the army plan to pull this off? And why is India suddenly at the center of his boldest vision yet? To understand that, we first need to know who Ibrahim really is and why the world underestimated him. Not long ago, Ibrahim was barely a name outside his own regiment. He wasn't a career politician, he wasn't from the ruling elite, and he wasn't the kind of leader global analysts expected to shake up geopolitics. Yet, in 2022, when he marched into the heart of Ouagadougou to seize power, people poured into the streets, cheering him like a revolutionary. Hero, what made? Different wasn't just his age being the youngest head of state in the world at the time, it was his unapologetic defiance of the old order. While other leaders hesitated to confront the long shadow of France in West Africa. Ripped the plaster off, he expelled French troops, shut down French influence in his country's affairs, and declared a new path forward, one of sovereignty, independence, and strategic partnerships beyond the old colonial ties. But wasn't reckless. He knew that Burkina Faso, one of the poorest countries in the world, couldn't just stand alone against the tide of global powers. He needed allies, and he needed them fast. Russia became an obvious partner, with its growing footprint across Africa. But wasn't content with just one card up his sleeve, because while the world was looking at Moscow, he was quietly looking east towards India, and that decision wasn't just strategic, it was visionary. Because if India is the rising giant of Asia, then linking it directly to Africa's raw resources and youthful population could open doors. Bigger than anything China or Europe ever imagined. But why India? Why not simply lean fully on Russia or China, who already had deeper networks in the region? The answer lies in Burkina Faso's geography, and in something most outsiders completely overlook. And that's where we head next. At first glance, Burkina Faso doesn't look like a gateway to anywhere. It's landlocked, surrounded by 6 countries, with no direct coastline. For years, analysts dismissed it as a nation trapped by its geography, condemned to depend on neighbors like Ghana, Cote d'Ivoire, or Togo for access to ports. But doesn't see it that way. He sees Burkina Faso as a bridge. To the west, it touches Mali, rich in gold. To the east, Niger, holding uranium and oil. To the south, Ghana and Cote d'Ivoire, whose ports open into the Atlantic Ocean. Burkina Faso sits at the crossroads of West Africa's resources and trade routes. Whoever controls its connections can shape the flow of minerals, energy, and commerce across the region. India knows this. As one of the fastest-growing economies on Earth, India needs raw materials. Uranium for nuclear energy, manganese for steel, gold for reserves, and above all access to Africa's 1.4 billion consumers. If India can anchor itself in Burkina Faso, it can project influence across an entire region, bypassing China's Belt and Road and offering an alternative to Europe's fading grip. For Burkina Faso, that means no longer being landlocked, it means being land-linked. E's gamble is to turn geography from weakness into strength. But bold maps on paper don't mean much without something even more critical, infrastructure. And that's the next piece of his plan. You can't be a gateway without a door. For that door is infrastructure. Burkina Faso's economy has long been crippled by poor roads, limited railways, and an unstable power grid. If he wants to become India's entry point into Africa, he needs to fix that fast. This is where India's expertise comes in. Over the past 2 decades, India has quietly become one of the biggest builders in Africa. From railways in Mozambique to power projects in Sudan, Indian companies have been laying down the bones of connectivity, and knows that if he can bring Indian engineers and investors into Burkina Faso, he can transform his nation into a hub for trade. Plans are already on the table. A new rail line linking Ouagadougou to the port of Tema in Ghana, upgraded highways to Côte d'Ivoire, and Indian-backed solar farms to stabilize electricity. Government has even floated the idea of a future trans-Sahelian corridor that would stretch from the Atlantic deep into the heart of the continent, with Burkina Faso at its center. But there's more to it than just physical infrastructure. Is also betting on digital connectivity, fiber optic networks, data centers, and fintech links that could make Burkina Faso not just a trade hub, but a financial hub too. With India's booming IT sector, the partnership could fuse Africa's raw resources with Asia's digital know-how. Of course, building is one thing, paying for it is another. And that's where things get complicated because big money projects attract big rivals. And some of them are not happy with Indian pivot, which brings us to the challenges. Every bold plan comes with enemies, for they are everywhere. Inside Burkina Faso, insurgencies continue to challenge stability. Armed groups operating across the Sahel threaten to derail construction and scare off investors. Beyond the borders, rival powers are watching closely. France, once the dominant player in Burkina Faso, is furious at being sidelined. China, which has poured billions into African infrastructure, doesn't want India stepping onto its turf. Even Russia, despite being a friend, won't be thrilled to see another power competing for influence. In Ouagadougou, and yet, seems unfazed. His speeches repeatedly hammer on one theme: sovereignty. He tells his people that Burkina Faso will no longer bow to old powers, no matter the cost. But sovereignty doesn't mean isolation, it means choosing partners on equal footing, and that's where India comes in. India doesn't come with the baggage of colonial history in Africa. It doesn't demand political alignment in the same way China or Russia might. Instead, it offers something desperately needs: technology, investment, and an alternative global partner that doesn't look like an occupier. Still, making India a central partner isn't without risks. Because if Burkina Faso is really going to be India's gateway to Africa, New Delhi will have to fully commit militarily, economically, and politically, and so far India has been cautious. But that may be about to change. Why would India risk getting involved in a volatile region like the Sahel? The answer lies in timing. Right now, India is racing to secure resources for its growing economy. It's also seeking allies in the global south to counterbalance China's influence. Africa is a critical part of that equation, and Burkina Faso offers something unique: a leader willing to make India the centerpiece of his national strategy. Indian businesses already have a foothold in West Africa, from pharmaceuticals to telecoms, but is offering something much larger: priority access to mining rights, partnerships in infrastructure, and even cooperation on defense. In return, Burkina Faso gets investment, training, and international legitimacy. For New Delhi, this is not just economics, it's geopolitics. By anchoring in Burkina Faso, India signals to the world that it's ready to compete in Africa, not as a minor player, but as a genuine power. And yet, the boldest part of this plan isn't about governments or corporations. It's about people. In a single question: why should Burkina Faso remain landlocked when it could be India's gateway to Africa? Ibrahim has redrawn the imagination of his nation. He has dared to link the destiny of a small Sahelian country with the future of one of the world's biggest rising powers. It's a plan filled with promise, danger, and ambition. For Burkina Faso, it offers a chance to escape poverty and dependency. For India, it offers a foothold into Africa's vast resources and markets. For the world, it signals that the era of new alignments is here, where the global south is no longer waiting for handouts, but crafting its own deals, on its own terms. Whether vision becomes reality will depend on roads that are yet to be built, deals that are yet to be signed, and risks that are yet to be faced. But one thing is certain: Burkina Faso is no longer invisible on the global map, and Ibrahim has made sure of that.